This show is brought to you by the All Pro Nation Radio Network. Be sure to like and subscribe and check us out online at allpronation.com, where fans have a voice.
We have quite a bit to talk about here in the Sports Greeks podcast, the last one before the big trip to Arizona. We've got bracket busters in the NCAA. We've got where the quarterbacks landed in the NFL, plus some other news, some injuries in the Major League Baseball, and also the American League Central preview for Major League Baseball. So the Sports Greeks podcast is going to start right now. So welcome to episode 12 of the Sports Greeks podcast with your host, Victor Logothetis. This is our last show before going out to Arizona, which I'm very excited about. Looking forward to seeing some ball games out there and getting some, talking to some people. We'll be posting up some content on our sports blogs throughout the week, both at allpronation.com and also phillysportsblog.com. So thanks for listening. If you're listening through Apple Podcasts, or the Lipson feed, or through the APN radio network, thank you very much for finding the time to download and listen to the show. So, let's get the business stuff out of the way first. The Twitter handle is BigGreek24. We are on Facebook. The Sports Greek is the page. Go and take a look at it. We also have an email address, which is victorlogo13@gmail.com. And the sports blogs we contribute to allpronation.com. and also phillysportsblogs.com. So check us out. So as mentioned in the show intro, we have quite a bit to talk about this week. Quite a bit's happened both in the NFL, Major League Baseball. Also, of course, have March Madness going on. So if you're an NCAA fan, the sound you probably heard both Thursday and Friday night was this, which are a bunch of people crumpling up their brackets, as we had two big bracket busters. Thursday night in the South region, you had Arizona, number 4 Arizona, actually, dropping to number 13 Buffalo, 89-68. And then Friday night you had the first ever 16-1 upset with University of Maryland, Baltimore College upsetting number 1 Virginia. And that game wasn't even close, 74-54. So I'm sure that busted a lot of brackets, because I'm sure if you were able to get past losing number 4 Arizona, you certainly didn't get past losing number 1 Virginia on that side of things. Villanova, the number 1 seed in the East, knocked off Alabama 81-58, so they are still alive, as are all the other number 1 seeds in the tournament at this point. Unfortunately, the follow-up game for Buffalo did not go as well. They dropped their game to number 5 Kentucky 95-75, and then we're recording on Sunday because of our trip to Arizona, so we have not gotten the results yet. UMBC plays number 9 Kansas at 7:45 tonight. We'll see how they make out. And see how their journey will either continue or stop right there. But regardless, they were the first ever 16 seed to beat a number 1 seed in the tournament. So in the NFL, the quarterbacks have landed, as we like to say. All the landing places for the free agent quarterbacks have been filled at this point. Here we go. A.J. McCarron signed with the Buffalo Bills. He is presumably the starter at this point, unless the Bills make a move to trade up in the draft to get a quarterback. So A.J. McCarron is a quarterback there. The Arizona Cardinals losing Kirk Cousins to Minnesota. They were not able to sign him. Settled, and I do say settled, for Sam Bradford at a price tag of $20 million, and they signed Mike Glennon to be his backup. Book it. Glennon will be the starter in Arizona for at least 7-8 games of the season this year. Bradford, degenerative knee situation. Everybody says when he is healthy, he does very well. But the problem with Sam Bradford, can't stay healthy. So, and that I don't see that changing. It wasn't that way with the Rams. It wasn't that way with the Eagles. It has not been that way with the Vikings. So what's going to be different this year? He will get hurt. It's just a matter of when and how. And then Glennon will be the quarterback for the Cardinals. You have a new head coach out there, shocked that they're going to attach his potential for success to the knee of Sam Bradford. Cousins signs with the Vikings. He was the best of the free agent quarterbacks available. The move, and I said this last week, that the Vikings simply had to make. They had to go out and get themselves a solid quarterback. They did so with Kirk Cousins. He's the best available. Whether he's the guy that's going to get him over the top has yet to be determined. Case Keenum actually has won more playoff games, by the way, than Kirk Cousins at this point. But Cousins, it's 3 years, I believe $84 million, 100% of it guaranteed. So they're all in with Cousins and the ability for him, hopefully, to get them over the top. And the New York Jets brought in Teddy Bridgewater, who was recently with the Vikings, and also brought back McCown, the quarterback they had last year. So they've actually went out and got 2 quarterbacks, and then made a deal with the Colts. They dealt the 2 second-round picks from this year that they had, and a second-round pick for next year, in addition to their pick, which was at 6, to move up to the number 3 spot in this year's draft, presumably to take a quarterback, as certainly there will be one available at that point. So we'll see how that goes for the Jets. Certainly the Jets need a franchise quarterback. They're bringing in Bridgewater, I guess, just to see what he's got left, see if he can play. But certainly they just moved up in the draft, presumably to get the quarterback. That's what we hear. One report yesterday on one of the New York radio stations thought maybe they would grab Chubb to give them a solid outside pass rush. But most people are thinking the Jets made the deal to slide up to get the quarterback. Interestingly enough, the Bills, having signed McCarron, who has absolutely no track record as a starter, and they've traded Tyrod Taylor away, they have the option to go with McCarron or Peterman, who only threw 5 interceptions and a half against the Chargers last year. So this draft on draft day could be very interesting. The Bills could move up. They could certainly slide up to 2, maybe make a deal with the Giants. They could also maybe trade with the Browns and move up to 4. It all really depends. The Browns signed Carlos Hyde last week, running back formerly with the 49ers. So the conventional wisdom now is that the Browns will take a quarterback first. I've said all along I would take Saquon Barkley with the first pick and then come back at 4 and take the next best available quarterback that's left. And at 4, there's going to be one. If they were to take Barkley at 1, and presumably if the Bills don't trade with the Giants then probably take a quarterback at 2. The Jets take a quarterback at 3 more than likely. So at 4, the Browns would have whichever quarterback was left of the bunch that are out there, or they could take Chubb to help with their pass rush, or trade down, maybe with the Bills and let the Bills grab one of the quarterbacks that are available. So a lot of intrigue that could happen on that draft day with some of these teams and the jostling and jockeying for position with this draft. The Vikings didn't stop just with Cousins. They went out and signed Sheldon Richardson, late of the Seattle Seahawks, more famously with the New York Jets, to team up with Linval Joseph, Daniel Hunter, and Everson Griffin to give what they believe to be a very formidable front 4. Richardson had exactly 1 sack in 2017 with the Seahawks, 36 quarterback pressures, which I think was in the top 10 in quarterback pressures. So I don't know. He's not the player he was with the Jets. Certainly the motivation of playing for a potential Super Bowl team in Minnesota could certainly motivate him. He's 30 years old. It's a 1-year deal. We'll see what happens. The Eagles fortified their front line by getting Michael Bennett, also recently from the Seahawks, in a trade. So they're going to have Bennett to go with Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Timmy Jernigan. They also signed Haloti Ngata, who was injured for a good part of the year with the Lions, but was very good with the Ravens before that. So, Douglas brings in another player he's somewhat familiar with from his time with Baltimore. I still think the Eagles' front group is better than the Vikings, even with the addition of Richardson with the Vikings, even with the losses that the Eagles have suffered, losing Bo Allen to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They released Vinny Curry, as they were not able to either trade him or restructure his contract. So Vinny Curry is gone. Vinny signed a big contract prior to the 2016 season with Philly. Did not live up to the money of the deal that first year. Played much better this year. But when you've got Derek Barnett, who was drafted first last year by the Eagles and actually had a very good rookie season, he deserves to get more of an opportunity this year. So it was either restructure the deal or try and trade or release him. Nobody would take him at the number that was there this year. I believe it was an $11 million cap hit. So Curry was released. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers swooped in and grabbed him as well. So they're very excited down in Tampa to have Bo Allen and Vinny Curry to go with Gerald McCoy. So we'll see how that works out. Wish both guys much success in Tampa Bay. I have no issue with them. When they were here with the Eagles, they certainly helped bring a Super Bowl to Philadelphia, to which Eagle fans will always be grateful. Yeah, I said last week with the addition of Cousins, that really puts the Vikings in what you would say the number one on paper position to win the NFC, definitely win their division and go really deep into the playoffs. A lot's going to determine what Kirk Cousins does. Honestly, their success. He's not won a playoff game. He's 0-1 in the playoffs. The quarterback they let go won a playoff game, Case Keenum. I certainly believe Cousins is a better quarterback than Keenum. He's proven that in Washington with the yards he's thrown for and everything else. He's, I think, 24-23 as a starter. But again, Redskins teams were not very good, and their defense gave up quite a few points in some of those games. The Minnesota defense will not give up the points that the Skins defense did. And really, Cousins just has to manage the game properly and hit his targets, don't turn the ball over. He'll have Dalvin Cook back at running back next year, which should, again, be very exciting. With the other moves that the Eagles have made overall so far, bringing back Nigel Bradham, which I said before was absolutely paramount to that linebacking core. Bringing in a guy like Nada, bringing in Bennett, bringing in guys with Super Bowl experience. They've been through it. They know what it's like to defend the Super Bowl. If we knew Carson Wentz right now on March 18th was going to be healthy to start the season for Philadelphia, they'd be my choice to repeat. Hands down, absolutely. But unfortunately, we don't. We don't know what's going to happen with Carson Wentz. We don't know if he's going to be back healthy to start the season. He certainly believes he will be, and I like to see him have that belief. But we'll see. It appears now with all the quarterback signings and everything else, there were some teams, I believe, that did inquire about Nick Foles. I think Cleveland did. I think the Cardinals did. And I just believe they shied away because the price tag was too high. We've reported before the Eagles were looking to get better than they got for Bradford, so that they got a first and fourth for Sam Bradford. So that would mean at least a better fourth to go with the first, maybe a first and a third. I don't think they would have done 2 twos or a second and a third. I think they definitely wanted to get a first rounder for the Super Bowl MVP. But now Foles looks like he'll stay with Philly. So barring any training camp injuries like we had with the Bridgewater situation 2 years ago, with the Tannehill situation last year, looks like Nick Foles, if Carson Wentz isn't ready to go on opening night, that Thursday night game, which we believe will be against the Vikings in Philadelphia, it'll be Nick Foles running out the tunnel to lead that team onto the field to defend their Super Bowl championship. So we have some injuries to report on here in Major League Baseball. Gerald Cotton of the Oakland Athletics looks like he has a tear in the UCL, which normally signifies the need for Tommy John surgery, which means he misses all of this year and part of next year. He's going to get a second opinion. Another injury to report on, Jared Eichhoff. No sooner did the Phillies sign Jake Arrieta to try and stabilize that rotation, they lose Jared Eichhoff 6 to 8 weeks with a lat injury. So hopefully he'll be able to get back, but that looks like it's middle to end of May by the time he comes back in. So we'll see if the Phillies stay in-house with the cast that they have. Looked like Pivetta was going to make it as the fifth starter even before they signed Arrieta. So now you have Ben Lively, Mark Leiter as two of the candidates that could now step into that rotation to help replace Eichhoff. And also coming from the National League East, former, 18-game winner from last year with the Royals, Jason Vargas, who signed a free agent deal with the Mets. Looks like he has a non-displaced fracture of the hamate bone in his non-pitching hand, which would be his right hand. So they're trying to decide if they would have surgery to fix it or see if he can just pitch through the injury. If they have the surgery, it looks like it'll be 6 weeks before he would be able to resume pitching. So we'll see what happens there. I'm sure we'll have some news for that, in the upcoming next few days. So the Mets and Phillies both potentially losing pitchers they were counting on to make 30+ starts and really pitch a lot of innings for them and help stabilizing their rotations. So now, without further ado, let's get into the American League Central Division, a division that currently is owned by the Cleveland Indians, a team that went to the World Series at the end of 2016 and lost a heartbreaker to the Chicago Cubs in 7 games. Came back last year, rode a 20-plus game win streak towards the end of the season. Looked like they were primed and ready to go back into the Fall Classic and win this time, but they lost to the New York Yankees in the opening round of the playoffs. So they come back. Now, if you look at Pacoda, you look at this division, the Indians are predicted to be the top team in that division, and why not? 96 wins is what Pacoda says. The Minnesota Twins come in next at 83 wins. They won 85 last year, and were the second wild card, losing the wild card game to the New York Yankees last season. Then you've got the White Sox, the Tigers, and the Royals at 71, 68, and 65 wins, respectively. Again, looking at the Indians, there's no reason to believe they're not just going to, again, just run away with this division unless they get a lot of guys injured. They are definitely the team to beat in this division. They've got an electric young shortstop in Francisco Lindor, who, although the batting average dropped off last year, still belted 33 home runs, 44 doubles. Didn't walk as much as the year before, but he's still young. Great defensive shortstop. He is probably the best defensive shortstop in the American League, if not all of baseball. So the Indians, for me, are the team that's going to come back and win that division. But that Indians lineup is just scary. You've got Lindor leading off, a 33 home run shortstop leading off. Kipnis, who was hurt last year, didn't put up his normal numbers, but 2 years ago when they went to the World Series, is 41 doubles and 23 home runs. That's just what he does. A breakout year from Jose Ramirez last year. Just what an unbelievable. He plays great defense, can play second and third. He'll settle in at third base for the Cleveland Indians, and he just had a monster year last year, 56 doubles, 29 home runs, playing third base mostly for the Indians. They brought in Yonder Alonso to play first base. He had 28 home runs last year. All that does is moves Edwin Encarnacion into the designated hitter position. This guy's averaged 40 and 100 the last 3 years with Toronto, and then his first year last year with Cleveland. A healthy Michael Brantley playing left field would go a long way for this ball club as well, and they got to the World Series without a healthy Michael Brantley 2 years ago. It's been 3 years since he's really been healthy. He's a 40-double, 20-home run guy. Was playing center field back then. He's going to play the corner in left field now. Lonnie Chisenhall, third base prospect when he came up, has settled into right field very nicely for the Indians. Roberto Perez, who has one of the strongest arms in baseball, is their catcher. And then Bradley Zimmer, the young center fielder, who came up last year when Tyler Naquin couldn't take over the job, will play center field. Naquin is still in camp. He had a fantastic season 2 years ago, hit 14 home runs at 296 for the Indians the year they went to the World Series. So he certainly is still battling it out for a position on that team, certainly if nothing else to come off the bench. Now, their rotation, again, is just outstanding. Kluber won the Cy Young Award. Carrasco won 18 games. Trevor Bauer, Clevenger, Josh Tomlin is their fifth starter, and they still got Danny Salazar on this team as well. Their closer is Cody Allen. Their setup guy is probably the best in the business, the lefty Justin Miller. I mean, it's just amazing just how good this team really is. Sorry, I got excited. I said Justin Miller. It's actually Andrew Miller, who, we saw famously pitching, it seemed like every inning in the World Series 2 years ago. Had a fantastic year last year as well. Not quite as many appearances as the season before, but still just pitches really great out of that bullpen. And he could close if they had any hiccups in their bullpen. And then next in the division, you got the Minnesota Twins, and now their lineup shapes up. They've got Maurer at first base, Dozier at second, Jorge Polanco at shortstop, Miguel Sano at third base. Their outfield is Rosario, Buxton, and Kepler going around the outfield with Castro behind the plate. Logan Morrison just came over recently, hit 38 home runs last year for the Rays. That was 7 more home runs that he had connected on the previous 2 seasons. So we'll see if the 38 from last year is just the outlier for his career, or if he'll continue on that power stretch. So that's the designated hitter. Sano, 25 years old, finally looks like he came into his own a bit last year, launching 27 home runs for the Twins. Kepler hit 19 home runs for the Twins. Maurer, really not a lot of power at the position at first base. Only hit 7 home runs last year, hit over 300. Had a bit of a comeback year, if you will. Brian Dozier's a Gold Glove second baseman, hits for power, hitting 42 home runs 2 years ago, 34 last year, driving in 99 and 93 runs respectively over those last couple seasons. Rosario out in left field had a bit of a breakout season as well. He connected on 27 home runs last year, 33 doubles, hitting 290 for the Twins. Buxton, the Gold Glove center fielder, who was as exciting a player as you want to see. He was the number 1 prospect in baseball for a few years before finally, making his way into the Twins lineup. He actually hit 16 home runs, but stole 29 bases in 30 attempts last year, and is electric in center field. He won a Gold Glove, and deservedly so. And that's many of the reasons why the Twins last year stayed in it and snuck up and kind of got into that wild card spot. They could do it again this year. I mean, the same thing happened 2015. They were relevant for a good part of the season, and then got swept that last series of the year. And then 16, things just didn't go right for them. Now their rotation is led by Jose Barrios, who when he first came up a couple of years ago looked very lost. That deer in the headlights type look. But he went 14-8 last year, made 25 starts, 145 and 2/3 innings, 139 strikeouts, gave up 15 home runs. He is the ace of the staff. They need him to not only do what he did last year, but actually do a little bit better. They got Jake Odorizzi from the Rays. They signed Lance Lynn to a 1-year, $12 million contract. Lynn had his best year last year for the Cardinals. Then you've got Kyle Gibson, who has kind of fallen off a little bit the last year or so. They've got Phil Hughes to fill it out. Fernando Rodney was brought in to be the closer. Rodney's the one that he'll get a lot of saves, but there'll be a lot of very interesting saves as he'll continue to work in and out of trouble in closing those games out. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Twins end up. This is certainly a team that could take a step backwards in the American League. They're not up there with the Yankees, Red Sox, Indians, Astros. They're not there. They're certainly not there. But they could be exciting to watch, and they've got some good young players on this team that will be a lot of fun to watch. After the Indians and Twins, really, you can just throw the other three teams in the division, which be the Royals, the White Sox, and Tigers, into a hat. And probably pull the correct order of finish randomly. To be honest with you, look at the Tigers. You've got Leonis Martinez going to play center field. Again, another guy with some great talent, great defensive player. Just couldn't really make it with the Rangers at one point. Went to the Mariners. Seemed like he had a decent year there. I think he finished up with the Cubs last year. Now the Tigers are the next team that are going to try and give him an opportunity to play. You got an old Miguel Cabrera, who certainly is not what he was just a few years ago. Victor Martinez, also another one, just not what he was a few years ago. Really nice, underrated shortstop in Iglesias, batting ninth. Mikey Matuk, who used to be with the Rays, is going to play the outfield, going to play left. Not a lot to get excited about here. James McCann at catcher is a solid young catcher for them. Their rotation, Jordan Zimmerman slots as the number one. It was just a few years ago. He was pitching with the Nationals 3 years ago, went 13-10, and I think he's gone 17-20 last 2 years with Detroit. He's just not pitched as well at all. He needs to kind of rebound and go back to what he was in the Nationals for them to have any real success. Michael Fulmer, was 2 years ago, was a solid rookie campaign. Matt Boyd showed a lot of his best pitching last year in September. So now we'll just see if he can get it done from October through August. But he slots as the number 4 guy in this rotation. Francisco Liriano, guy who came up back in 2005 with the Twins, and then had to have arm surgery. And everybody's kind of been waiting for him to come back and be that pitcher that he was going to show. He's going to get the opportunity here in Detroit to do that. And then lefty Daniel Norris, 25-year-old, slots out as the 5th starter. Shane Green comes in as the closer. He'll have the job all year. He came in late last year as the closer after K-Rod got released and they traded Justin Wilson. So that would be the Tigers. Like I said, you kind of throw these guys in almost any order and be correct. The Royals were able to pick up Mike Moustakas, got him back on a nice 1-year deal, so he'll slide in to play third base at this point. They got Alex Gordon, could play left, could play center. Jorge Soler, they got from the Cubs a couple years ago. Looks like he's going to get an opportunity to play now. They got John Jay, who defensively is as good as any outfielder, very, very solid. Left-handed hitter as well. Chesler Cuthbert looks to be the DH. They re-signed Alcides Escobar. They're solid shortstop, great defensively. Lucas Duda was brought in to play first base. Tons of power. Not great defensively, but certainly can can if he stays healthy all year, could hit you 35 home runs. Sal Perez, one of the best catchers in the game. Again, rocket arm, coming off a really nice year. He comes back as well, so we'll see what happens there. The rotation, Danny Duffy is outstanding pitcher. Ian Kennedy, solid veteran pitcher for this ball club. Good strikeout potential. Jason Hamill was brought in last year, didn't have a very good year. They've got Junis and Carnes, the fourth and fifth guys. Kelvin Herrera slots in as their closer. The White Sox, another ball club, have Luis Garcia in left. Johan Moncada, who came over in the Chris Sale deal, will play second base for him. Jose Abreu is the first baseman. Alvasale Garcia will play the other corner outfield. Wellington Castillo will be their catcher this year. Adam Engel, who came up last year, will play center field. Tim Anderson's at shortstop, and Yomer Sanchez will be the third baseman. Their rotation, they got Lucas Giolito, came over in the Eaton deal last year from the Nationals. Fantastic prospect. See what he can do hopefully this year over a full season. He got a taste of the majors last year. Big game James Shields anchors this rotation. At this point, he's a veteran innings eater. Certainly a guy that if he's pitching well, the White Sox could deal at the trade deadline and maybe get some prospects for. Miguel Gonzalez, who came up at one point with the Orioles. Again, solid major league pitcher, could pitch a few innings. Another candidate to be traded at the deadline potentially. Ronaldo Lopez and Carson Fulmer fill out the rotation. Then you got Joaquim Soria is coming in as their closer. And again, if he's having a good year and the White Sox are not anywhere near the wild card, he's a guy that could also get dealt somewhere in there for some prospects for the White Sox. Yeah. So again, you look at this American League Central. I mean, you've got one team. Really, it's the Indians. They're a 96-plus win team. They can end up with the best record in baseball. They can win 96 games. They can win 102 games. Really depends. They're as solid as they come. They've got depth. They've got talent. And quite honestly, probably have a chip on their shoulder. Getting knocked out in the first round of the playoffs last year, they were really picked to go back to the World Series. So, certainly, they've got that to prove. You've got Kluber and Carrasco at the top of that rotation, and they are 5-6 pitchers deep in that rotation. You got Andrew Miller, you got Allen as the big pieces in the bullpen. I mean, they're just a really loaded for bear ball club. But as always, you've got arbitration coming up with players and everything. The window is slowly closing, so if they're going to get it done, it's got to be this year or next year. The Twins are a team that again came on last year, ended up getting into the wild card spot despite losing that game. They're a team that could repeat that, or they're a team that could take a couple of steps backwards. I mean, you could have just the Indians be the only team over 500 in this division. There isn't another team I see making a big surge in the division. Before the Royals signed Moustakas, they were pretty much committed to retooling that ball club, but he was able to come back to them on a really club-friendly 1 year, $8.5 million deal. So they were, they'd have been stupid to say no to that. So they did bring him in, and he'll be a veteran presence in that lineup on that ball club, along with guys like Alex Gordon and Sal Perez, helping with the younger players going to have coming up. The White Sox are still in that rebuilding mode, and the Tigers, quite honestly, just haven't let go. And they're going to live and die with guys like Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez. And there's a very good chance that team could finish dead last in that Central Division this year. If there's a team that really I could see taking that huge step back and falling, that's the Tigers. I just don't think that their veterans have it anymore. They got some nice other players in there. Their pitching is suspect. We'll see what Green can do as their closer, but he's unproven. So we'll see how the Central works out. But from the playoff standpoint, the Indians probably, in my mind, are the number one team in the American League. They go win as number one seed in my opinion. The Twins could eke out a wild card spot. We haven't gotten to the American League West yet, but you figure the Mariners could certainly be in the mix for that as well. In the Eastern Division, I said before, you've got the Yankees, you got the Red Sox. Whoever doesn't win the division probably is a wild card. I also said that you could get a push from Baltimore, Toronto, though unlikely. I've always said that Baltimore, just because of their offense, certainly could slug their way into it. And again, if some other things went wrong for the teams in front of them. So it'll be exciting, and we'll see what happens. Now, coming up this week, we're going to be leaving and going out to Arizona for a few days. So we'll be posting daily content and articles on our experience out there and some of what we're seeing. We're going to go to a bunch of games, so we'll get to see some of the rookies, some of the prospects. We'll be able to file some some stories this week, both on allpronation.com and also phillysportsblogs.com. And hopefully we'll maybe get some interviews and talk with some fans, maybe a few players while we're out there. And that stuff will be part of our show next Monday on the 26th when we do this again. So we look forward to being out there. I've never been out to Arizona for spring training, been to Florida a few times. So that's going to be a lot of fun. The other big update is the Sports Greek will be at opening day in New York at Citi Field on March 29th to see the New York Mets open up their 2018 season. Get to see Noah Syndergaard take the hill for the New York Metropolitans on the 29th of March. I'm very excited about that. So we'll give more details on that as the day draws a bit nearer. But it's off to Arizona now. So again, follow me on Twitter at BigGreek24. Email address is victorlogo13@gmail.com. The Facebook page is The Sports Greek. And don't forget, we are on the allpronation.com and also phillysportsblogs.com. So again, thanks again for listening, and whether it was from the Apple Podcast, if it was from the Libsyn feed, or if it was through the APN Radio Network, appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. Have a great week. For those in the East Coast, buckle down for the next nor'easter, which is supposed to roll through on Tuesday and Wednesday. Hope everybody makes out okay with that. And again, we'll see you, and we look forward to doing this again next week. Thanks again.